There's nothing quite like going to an amusement park to ride a coaster that you've anticipated riding for quite some time, only to find out you were just a little too big to fit on it. If you're a bigger person and you worry when you go to a theme park if you're going to be able to fit on some of the different coasters, I made this guide for you. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Rich, and my family and I love amusement parks and theme parks. We've been to over 100 theme parks and amusement parks all around the country and Canada. I've been on hundreds of roller coasters, and I'm a pretty big guy, so I definitely know the struggle. Trust me when I say this will be the best guide you will find on YouTube. I have seen other people do these different test seat guides, but it is very hard to judge from somebody who's 5'8" versus somebody who's 6'2", whether or not you're gonna fit. I see a lot of these other guides mention weight, and really that's irrelevant. It all has to do with where you hold your weight, how you're built. I'm also going to give you different tips and tricks on how to adjust your body to fit on certain coasters. I'm going to be going through a bunch of different roller coaster manufacturers, starting with RMC, Rocky Mountain Construction. They make some of the most thrilling roller coasters on earth. Most of their lap bars and seat designs are exactly the same, with the difference being less than an inch in most cases. I would say that if you're a size 42 or less for men or size 22 for ladies, you have a pretty good chance of fitting on an RMC. It's all about lifting that belly up and getting it over the lap bar, and this is an example of what I'm talking about. If you don't necessarily hold your weight by your belly, but rather your thighs and hips, you may have issues on an RMC. Keep in mind that not all restraints have these little handlebars, and those really help. But when trying the test seat out, make sure to have a friend give your lap bar a little push if necessary, because the ride operators certainly do not have a problem helping you out. This particular seatbelt design is not the best for larger people. A lot of times they get caught on your shirt, pants, and they're just overall not very comfortable. It's used by numerous different manufacturers, RMC being one of them. They also tend to be very short versus a standard seatbelt. I took the liberty of making this list. The ones you see with the check mark beside them are the least accommodating. Twisted Cyclone happens to be the least accommodating RMC out there. This list doesn't cover every single RMC coaster, so keep that in mind. Feel free to comment below. I'm always happy to help answer any questions that somebody may have in regards to fitting on a coaster. Also, a lot of the single rail coasters are less accommodating as well, depending on where you hold your weight. If you have a broader chest, you may run into some issues with these single rail coasters. I do want to say that Wonder Woman Golden Lasso at Six Flags Fiesta Texas was the least accommodating. We're going to move on to the manufacturer Intamin. Now Intamin uses restraints that are very similar to RMC for their wooden roller coaster El Toro. However, the restraints on El Toro seem to be a lot tighter than some of the RMC ones that I've been on. Moving on to some of the most accommodating restraint systems that Intamin has to offer. Skyrush is one of the most accommodating roller coasters out there. If you have wider hips, you may have an issue, but I would say somebody with a size 44 waist for men and maybe a size 22 or so for women would be able to fit on Skyrush easily. Skyrush uses the same restraints as Velocicoaster at Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. My suggestion to anyone who holds their weight near their belly would be to lift your belly up as you are about to sit down, bringing the lap bar down as you're sitting. This method seems to be the most effective. If you're finding this video to be helpful, please give this video a like. Another roller coaster that uses this same restraint design would be Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Just a little tip, If you are a larger person, you want to stay away from row 8 on Pantheon. For some reason, it seems to be less accommodating than the other rows. So moving on to Intamin's over-the-shoulder restraint system. Now, certain rides are absolutely accommodating, Kingda being one. If you carry your weight in your chest area, you may have some issues, but as far as hips and thighs, you won't have any issues on this coaster at all. The seats themselves are pretty large, but that's why they have a test seat. I highly recommend checking it out before getting on this ride. See the little yellow line on the seatbelt? That will indicate whether you will fit on this coaster or not. You have to be able to visibly see that yellow line on the seatbelt. So if you fit on Kingda, chances are you probably fit on Intimidator 305 or Project 305 or whatever it's going by these days. It's almost exactly the same. Now, I'm not going to go over every single roller coaster by every manufacturer. It would take an awful long time, but I am going to just discuss some of the most popular ones. Maverick is another one, and out of these three, Kingda, I-305, and Maverick, it's the most accommodating. You saw where the yellow line was for me on Kingda. Well, with Maverick, it's probably an extra inch. Now, you would think that with most of the over-the-shoulder restraints that they would be pretty similar. However, Storm Runner and Fahrenheit at Hershey Park, having almost the exact same design as the other three coasters I just mentioned, are the least accommodating coasters I have ever been on. And yes, I have been on these coasters in the past. Basically, if you have a wider chest, larger hips, thighs, you're probably not going to fit. If you're over 6'3", you may have some issues as well. I have literally seen guests that were on the thinner side but a little too tall, and the restraint would not close the entire way. Moving on to another fan favorite, Millennium Force, located at Cedar Point. This one has that same terrible seat belt. My tip and trick for fitting on this coaster would be to make sure that seat belt is below that metal bar on both sides. You do not want it to be going through where the handrail is and the other metal bar. This could cost at least an inch. I would say that Millennium Force is one of the most polarizing coasters when it comes to people being able to fit on this thing. Some people can, some people can't, and it's very important to use that test seat. If you're over a size 40, 42, you're probably not going to fit. Waistline is key with this coaster. You can have a belly on you, but as long as your waistline is thin, you can possibly fit on Millennium Force. Here's my list of some of the least accommodating coasters that Intamin has to offer. The ones with the checks beside them are least accommodating. Again, I don't have every single coaster listed. Moving on to our next manufacturer, and that would be B&M, Bolger Maillard. B&M offers a bunch of different styles of roller coasters. They have floorless, inverted coasters, hyper, giga, winged coasters, all fairly accommodating to an extent. The inverted coasters and floorless coasters with the older style over-the-shoulder restraints, and some of the dive coasters, they can be a little bit tight, especially if you hold your weight in the belly and chest area. Pretty much all of these are roughly within an inch or so of each other, so I'm not going to really elaborate on them. If you fit on one of the inverted coasters with an over-the-shoulder restraint, you're probably going to fit on the floorless coaster as well. Just keep in mind, you'll probably have to use the bigger person seat, and sometimes those are designated to certain rows. The newer vest style restraint is a little tighter than the older restraints, however, pretty close. You can find the newer ones on most newer dive coasters, wing coasters, and inverted coasters. If you have wider hips Most of these shouldn't be a problem. My personal favorite is the clamshell design, one of the best designs by any manufacturer. It's very accommodating, and you can find these on most of the Hyper and Giga models, such as Candymonium, Mako, Orion, Fury 325, and so many more. I would say if your waist is around a 42, 44, you should be fine. The only thing that may cause an issue is wider hips. So that's going to cover the 3 major manufacturers. There are some other great manufacturers I also want to talk about, but I'm not going to go into such depth as I did the last 3. Aerodynamics is one of the most accommodating. They're no longer in business, but a lot of their coasters are still operational. Their over-the-shoulder restraints, just about anybody can fit on these things. Their mine trains are just a little lap bar. Pretty much anyone can fit on these as well. The next coaster manufacturer I want to talk about is Vekoma. Their over-the-shoulder restraints are very similar to B&M's. Their least accommodating would be their flying model. This seat restraint is from Nighthawk at Carowinds. It actually has a weight limit of 265 pounds. However, when I went on it, I was a little heavier than that, and I still was able to ride it. Next manufacturer I'm going to talk about is Mach Rides. This here is Time Traveler. It's located at Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri. And one thing about this coaster is the test seat is very inaccurate. I tried the test seat out. It said that I was not able to ride. However, I still attempted to try and see if I would fit. To my surprise, I was able to ride. Not only did I ride it, but I was able to ride it about 10 times without any issue whatsoever. Some of the test seats are not very accurate, but if you're close with the test seat, sometimes they're worth giving it a try. This was a great example of that. There are a ton of other roller coaster manufacturers, and I'm sorry I couldn't get into every single one. However, if you do comment below and you have a question regarding any of the other manufacturers, I'm happy to help. I'm also happy to help with anybody who might have any concerns on whether they would fit on any of these rides as well. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really does help. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.